Give it intention.
So both sides. We're going to start the Gemara now. We did the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Katan minolan de potu. Very interesting question at the Gemara. Right here on Masechet Sanhedrin Beis, the first line in the Gemara. Katan minolan de potu. Right, the Mishnah had established that a katan, before he brings shtei saros, is not included in the chiyuv misa of a ben sora umora. And now the Gemara wants to know minolan. And it's very interesting. The Gemara now is going to attack the havamina of minolan. And the Gemara says, minolan, what kind of question is minolan? Kediktani taima, the Mishnah itself gives the reasoning and says that shaloba lechlal mitzvos. And therefore, the katan has not violated any mitzvah. He's not included in any mitzvah. We never found that a katan is chayav in mitzvahs. And therefore, he is potter from any violation that he might have been guilty of as a gadol, because a katan is potter min ha-mitzvahs. So why are you asking me nolan? Very interesting that the structure of the Gemara, don't ask me a question when the answer is written in the Mishnah. Obviously, from the fact that you asked the question minolan,
ערב טוב, רוצה להגיד תודה לרב ורזון, יוסף צבי רימון, שמגיע לכאן, לתת שיעורים כל הכבוד, להשקיע, לעבור בערב, במקום להיות עם המשפחה, אנחנו מאוד מעריכים את זה, ואנשים מאוד נהנים מהשיעור, למדנות ושמחה בלמדס, אז בעזרת השם שהרב יזכה להמשיך להגדיל תורה ולהאדירה.
אמן, תודה רבה. שנשמע בשורות טובות. So the premise of the Gemara is that the person who asked the question minolan was intelligent. Otherwise it wouldn't have been recorded here in the Gemara. But the Gemara attacks such a question. How could you intelligently ask minolan when the Mishnah itself answers that question? So that's point number one. Vesu. Now the Gemara attacks the Makshan with a second attack. Hecha ashkechan di anash hakasuv. Forget about the Mishnah for a moment. The very premise of the question minolan indicates that we need what? A yalfusu. We need a pasuk in the Torah, and we couldn't derive it from Svara. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask minolan immediately. And the question that the Gemara is now raising is, what kind of a havamina would you have that a katan should be chayav and put to death as a punishment for a crime when he's not guilty of any crimes? And that's the Gemara's language. Heicha ashkechan donash hakosik. Do you have any precedent anywhere in the Torah and Shas, anywhere that a katan could be punished for his crimes? If you have such a precedent, that I can understand minolan. How do you know that a katan is potter in the case of ben sora umora? But there is no precedent. There is no case at all that we're familiar with in which a katan is punished for his crime. So why do you look for a pasuk? So again, the double attack. On the one hand, the first attack against minolan is a technical attack. How could you raise the question minolan when the Mishnah itself addresses the question and answers the question by saying shalom balach lala mitzvahs? And furthermore, says the Gemara, forget about the Mishnah for a moment. Even if it wasn't in the Mishnah, I can't understand how you have the chutzpah to ask the question minolan as if to say that there's a havamina that a katan could be punished. So the Gemara answers the following. Anan, in other words, the Makshan is defending himself when he asked the question, minolan, hachi kamrinan. Here's the underlying logic of the reason I think a katan could be included and should be included in ben sora umora, and therefore I need a yalfusa to exclude him. Atu ben sora umora al cheto nerag, al shem sofo nerag. You may recall, Rabbosai, that this was a sugya later on in Daf Ayin Beis that we saw in our introduction, in which Rabbi Yossi Aglili formulated the principle that we cannot justify the death, the capital punishment of a ben sora umora without introducing a whole new principle, which defies the judiciary system as we know it in halacha, and that is al shem sofo nidon. Again, we tried through many rishonim to try to analyze. Maybe we can come up with a svara that, he's going to be a rotzeach, therefore he has already a status as a rodev, or alternatively, he violated the X number of lavim. You remember the Ramban in his Pirush al Torah in the Parsha Ben Sorah that we saw at the beginning has a whole list of 3 lavim that this young man is guilty of violating. But at the end of the day, Rabbi Yossi Aglili points out that none of those violations would justify a capital punishment, and therefore we have to introduce a whole new principle that basically underlies the whole system and is antithetical to the system, namely, al shem sofo hu nidon. We're going to judge him for the future. We anticipate that he will do this, he'll do that. Some Rishonim say he's guilty of makalel, or he'll be guilty of some other chiyuv skila. Maybe he'll violate the Shabbos. Maybe he'll murder someone on Shabbos. You remember all these discussions that we had. But all that is al shem sofo. We don't punish a person in a beis din because we anticipate that he's going to violate a crime. Except perhaps in the case of Rodef, but then again, you have to have somebody who's actually in a situation of Redifa. He's in the action, he's in the momentum of Redifa. So we must introduce Al Shem Sofo Nita. Oh, says the Gemara Hashtadas Lachi, if you're telling me Al Shem Sofo Nidon, meaning he doesn't deserve this punishment because he hasn't yet committed the crime. So what difference does it make whether he's a Katan or a Gadol? If the Torah yarda Torah lo sof daito, and the Torah realized that this young man is totally addicted, and he will do whatever he has to do in order to fulfill his addiction, then we could already anticipate that at the age of a katan. The shtei saros that make him into a gadol are not going to change one iota. The nidan al shem sofa, the yarda Torah lisof daito shel yeled zeh, and therefore, if it's kevan shal shem sofa nega filu katanami, why can't we put a katan to death for the same kind of violations that are knowing in a gadol, namely he eats and he drinks and he steals and the whole 9 yards? The ode, and furthermore, even from a perspective of pshuto shel mikra, when I read the parsha Ben Sorah Mor and I see the word ben, I'm inclined to conclude that even a katan is included. That the word ben could refer very well to a katan. So the Gemara says the ode, and another support that underlies the questioner who said Minolan, is the fact that ben v'lo ish. And you need a pasuk because if the Torah had only said ish, okay, ish is a gadol. But the Torah says ben soramor, not ish soramor, but ben soramor. The Gemara thinks that ben soramor should refer to a katan. If it would have said ish without the word ben, nicha, then I understand I have no leg to support on from the perspective of biblical exegesis to conclude that we're talking about a katan. But if the Torah doesn't suffice by saying ish, but rather adds the word ben, then why not assume katan mashma, that even a katan is included in the parsha? So let's just summarize. On the one hand, the Gemara has a twofold attack against the Makshan who said Minolan. From the perspective of the Mishnah already addressed that question and offered an answer. And that is that a katan is lo ba lichlal mitzvos, correct? Secondly, what would have been the possible logic as an underlying basis for your conclusion that we need a pasuk because a ben soramar could include a katan? How could that be? A katan is not included in mitzvah, so he's not guilty of anything. The Gemara answers, well, you have a mistake over here. You're assuming that we're operating within the legal system as we know it, and a katan is not liable, he's not culpable for his crimes, and therefore for sure you assume that since, as the Mishnah formulates it, lo ba l'chlal mitzvahs, a katan could not be liable, he could not be guilty of a crime, and therefore there's no havamina. But I'm not working within, and Ben Soramar is not working within the framework of judiciary law as we know it. We're not bound by the restrictions of Beis Din, and we look for someone who's already chayav and he's guilty of a criminal act with all that we need, Eidim and Asra and whatever. We're talking about al shem sofa hu nidon. And furthermore, says the Makshan, why does the Torah, instead of just calling him an ish, call him a ben? The word ben seems to indicate that he's a katan. And this leads the Gemara to resurrect from the dead the question Minon. And Rabbi Yehuda Marav is going to actually address this question as a very serious question based on the two arguments of the Maksha. Number one, that Nidan al Shem Sofa should apply to a Katan as it does to a Gadol. And number two, the word ben. And therefore, the Omer cry, Nidi Alfusa. What is the Alfusa? It says, Ki yeh le'ish ben. So what we're going to do here in this Yalfusa, it's a very unique kind of analysis of the pasuk. We're going to combine two words together, so to speak, as one hyphenated phrase. And it's going to read, Ish ben. What does that mean, Ish ben? I mean, Manavshach. Either he's an Ish or he's a ben. And the Gemara now pulls, I would call it almost a rabbit out of the hat here, a magical trick. What does the word ish mean? It means gvuraso shel ish. So what is ish ben, that hyphenated phrase? It means ben hasamuch ligvuraso shel ish. So we're talking about ish in a new context. And we're going to see in Mirz Hashem in Tosfos that there's a pasuk in Sefer Malachim which clearly indicates that the word ish means a more mature adult, not just a katan who became a gadol at the age of 13 when he manifested shtei saras, but we're talking about an older person. He's an ish. He's a fully mature, developed man. And that's going to be based, as I said before, says Tosfos, on a pasuk where the word ish doesn't just mean shtei saras, it means an older age. And we're going to see that al-pi Torah sheba'al peh, that older age is going to be defined, as we saw in our Mishnah, if you recall, ad sheyakiv hazokan atachton. And that's when he becomes ish, and in the Gemara's language, that's called gvuraso shel ish. Do you follow? It's not just ish. He became an ish. He left the status of a katan, entered into the status of a gadol, and therefore he's an ish. No. It's gvuraso shel ish. It's a more powerful, more mature ish. And based on that assumption, now when we take the word ben and we attach it to ish, then we go down one notch from the more developed ish, which is Yaakov Hazakan, which is gvuraso shel ish, and we go to the level of what, Rabosai? Shtei saras. Do you follow? So we have three different age groups with regard to a young lad. We'll go from the lowest to the highest, right? We have a katan who is not yet manifested shtei saros. Then we go to the next level. He already has shtei saros. He's a gadol l'kol dinei Torah. And then we have the third level, which is called gvuraso shel ish, because we're interpreting the word ish as gvuraso shel ish. And now when we take the word ben and we attach it to the word ish, we drop down one notch, not two notches, because it's going to be a ben hasamuch leish. And what does ish mean? Ish means gvuraso shel ish. So let's just throw out a number. I mean, this is like I'm just picking a number out of the hat. Let's say Lama Zogin at 13.6, okay, 13 and a half, he'll have what we call gvuraso shel ish and Yaakov Hazakan Hatachta. I'm just throwing out a number. Again, it would depend on each child, but just for saber to ozen. So when he's 12, going on 13, he's a katan, out of the parasha ben Sorumor. When he's 13.6, he's already reached the ceiling. He's crossed the, so to speak, the red line, and he's already considered what? Gvuraso shel ish. So he's not in the parasha anymore. Because we need a ben hasamuch leish. So he's got to be younger. He's got to be in a different category. Which category is that middle category which forms the window of time in which the young man could be held liable as a ben sarmar and put to death? It's that half a year between 13 and 13.5. At 13, assuming he has shtei saros, he becomes a gadol. He is now a ben who's samach leish. Again, if the word ish meant a gadol, then ben asamach leish would mean that he's younger than 13. But since the word ish, again, based, as I said before, on a pasuk in Tanakh, means gvuraso shalish, so he's much older. He's already has this Yaakov hazakon hatachton. Therefore, samach leish, because we're interpreting ben ish as one phrase, and ben ish means younger than an ish. It means that middle category. And that is between Shtei Saros and Yaakov Hazakon Hatacht. Exactly how many months that is, we don't know. We'll have to see the sugyas later on in the parak. It's from my perspective, this is premature, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. It's a very, a limited, very short period of time. And that's the time in which he became guilty of being a Ben Sora Umo. Now, I want to point out to you on both sides that if I had, I know today they don't call it a blackboard anymore, they call it a whiteboard. If I had a whiteboard, this is what I would write on the board. Is anybody willing to take out a pen and a paper and write this down? And then maybe we'll take a picture of it.
What's a pen and paper?
You don't even know what that is. Okay. Right. This is the office without paper, right?
You want a whiteboard?
But, honestly, I'd rather if you do the work. Can you write this down on a piece of paper? Okay, I'll find a piece of paper for you. Here, pass this down. You need a pen? You need a pen?
This time frame that we're talking about, is this when he does the crimes or when
everything from A to Z, from soup to nuts. Correct. Because again, the Avera can't be implemented before he has Shtei Saros. He's only be guilty for the act of a gadol, because the Mishnah says that lo balachal mitzvahs. Yeah, you want to write this down? All right, it's good. So what you do is the following: put a line down the middle. Okay, down the middle, what do we call it? A vertical line. Okay. And then on one side, you'll choose which side. It doesn't matter to me. Write the word zachar with an underline underneath it, and in a parallel on the other side of the line, write nekeva. Okay, then. Now, what I want to try to prove to you is that there's a striking, almost what I would call mirror image of the two sides of this line of Zachar and Nekeva with regard to 3 periods of time. A Nekeva goes through 3 periods of time. What's the first one? Katana, obviously. Up to the age of 12, she's a Katana. Now she sees Shtei Saros, she becomes what? A Nara. She now waits 6 months and she becomes a Bogeres, or a Gdola, if you want to call it that. So what do we have here? We have 3 periods of time, which are all Doraisa. This is not a rabbinic invention, with regard to a young girl. Now we switch over to the other side of the line. Okay, then? We're very tzniistic, so there's a mechitza down the middle, right? So we get to the Zachar, and we have a Katan, up to the age of what? 13. Then we go to the next level, which is like parallel to a Nara. It's like that in-between stage. In Yiddish, we call it Nishtaher and Nishtahin. And what's in that middle stage? That is the middle stage of Shtei Saros. Then we go to the highest stage, or the most developed and advanced stage, and that's called Ad Sheyakif. Yakif is Yud, Kuf, Yud, Pei, otherwise known in the Gemara's language as Vuraso Shel Ish. Now, I emphasize this because I don't believe for 1 minute, and again, you could disagree with me, you're the jury, that this is coincidental. That just happens to be that just like for an Akeva, we have 3 levels with that middle level called a Nara, so too, with regard to a Zachar, we have 3 levels. However, even if I sold you on this piece of, shall I say, structural Torah, you'll still have to get up and yell and scream the following. That's only relevant to one halach in the entire Shas, and that is what? Ben Soramora. There is no difference in halacha whatsoever between Shtei Saros and Gvuraso Shel Ish, which means Yaakov, with regard to any halacha in the Torah. The only nafkamina is with regard to Ben Soramora, where the Torah says that the culpability for a young lad has to fit into that time frame, as you called it, of Shtei Saras until Vuraso Shalish, that time period which we said is undefined. It depends on every boy and so forth and so on. So that's a unique halacha in Ben Sora Umar. However, despite that fact, I still vote, right? We're in an election year, right? I still vote in favor of this mirror imaging. Why? Because what I'd like to establish here is that with regard to Ben Sora Mora, we have a new halach of gadlus. And that halach of gadlus, although initiated by Shtei Saros, terminates with Adshe Yaakov. And we go into a different state, which is called Gvuraso Shel Ish, meaning the Torah is saying that which parallels a Nara for an Akeva, in the case of a Zachar, makes him into a Ben Sora Mora if he's guilty of all these crimes, etc. In Ben Sora Mora, there's a new halach of gadlus, which is mafkia, the punishment of a Ben Sora Mora. And that gadlus is Adshe Yaakov. So that even though in Nara, what we're saying is that gadlus makes her more responsible, she goes out of the rishus of her father, he can no longer marry her off, etc., etc. So gadlus really means for a nekeva, as it does in general for a zachar in kol atarku -1, it means a higher element of responsibility and culpability, does it not? In the case of Ben Sora Mora, we have a flip, but even though it's a flip, it's fundamentally the same idea. There is a concept called gadlus, and gadlus, as opposed to our general understanding of gadlus as generating more of responsibility, here, gadlus in Ben Sora Mora, which is called Samach Le'ik, right, Gvuros Ish, becomes a mafkia, becomes a poter. It becomes almost a relieving of his responsibility. But nevertheless, we can call it gadlus. Now, you might ask, Rabbi Burzon, why are you getting so excited about this? Why we call it in Yiddish tzehitz. You're sweating it out here. Well, very nice. It is gadlus. It's not gadlus. Okay, my nafkamina. What difference it makes? And I believe there might be a tremendous nafkamina. But in order to try to convince you, to seduce you into my position that there is an nafkamina, I want to go back to the Gemara itself. The shakla v'tarya of this sugya. What was the havamina? When I say havamina, I mean those who objected to minolan. And what was the maskana? Those who justified the question minolan. Yesh lachkor. Here's my chakira. Anybody want to take a stab at it? I think it's, when you'll hear from me, you'll say it's baby stuff. I could have said it myself. So if anybody wants to say it now, please say it before I say it. You want me to say it?
Yeah.
All right, I'll say it. What is Ben Sora Mora? Is Ben Sora Mora, we'll call it, again, for lack of a better term, Torah's Onshim, as we saw in the Ramban's introduction, that a Ben Sora Mora is guilty of at least 3 different lavim, and the Rishonim had other lavim, like, for example, Makalel, or no. Ben Sora Mora is a separate halacha Ben Sora Mora. The Torah calls him a Ben Sora Mora. And once you give him that name, all the dinim fall and follow, and he's guilty, and he's going to be put to death. But it's not Torah's onshim. So the Havamina, the Makshan who attacked Minolan, how did he understand Ben Sora Mora? It's Torah's onshim. He's guilty of many crimes. We'll soon see that we're going to bring him into Bezdin, and on the first round we're going to give him Malchus. This is Torah's Onshim. Again, the Torah went very far here in Torah's Onshim, admittedly, and made it into a capital crime, but okay, it's still within the framework of criminal actions. It might not justify Misa, those criminal violations, but nevertheless, This is the Torah's ownership. And we're going to try to prove that point. And if that be the case, then what do I have to assume as a dover portion? I don't need any psukim to derive this. Can't be a katan. A katan is not included in Torah's ownership. Forget it. Don't even dream about it. So the Gemara says you're wrong. That's not what Ben Soromor is about. It's a new concept called, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, a shame Ben Soromor. The Torah sets up certain guidelines, and if these conditions have been implemented, have been fulfilled, there's a chal Hashem gavra, I would call it, to use a brisket terminology, of a Ben Soromor. L'ma dover dome, it's like Eid Zomim. How many people died at the hands of the Eidim Zomim? 0. Zippo. Because kasher Zomam v'lo kasher Osa. This is a sugya I'm learning now on Wednesday nights in a place called Mishkan Tzipor, if you ever heard of it. You take a flying wing, the wings of a bird, and you'll get there. Mishkan Tzipor. Anyway, so kasher Zomam v'lo kasher Osa. So why are we killing an Eid Zomim? He didn't kill anybody. He's an Eid Zomim, period. He's got a chal Hashem gavra Eid Zomim because 2 Eidim came in and said, Imano Yisam, etc., etc.
I need to go back to Rodei also. Rodei also didn't do anything. He was going to do something.
Could be that Rodef is also not B'Torah's Onshim. I don't know. Every sugya that we're going to learn, Rodef is coming around the bend. We'll get there perhaps by Purim time. At the rate we're going, because we only meet once a week. So how much can I accomplish at once a week? In any event, if I assume a chal Hashem ben Soromor, so what would be the din of a katan? Is it feasible, thank you so much, that a katan would be included in ben Soromor? If it's only a chal Hashem and it's not onshim, so what are you going to argue that a katan is not included in onshim? That's irrelevant. And I'll prove it to you, says the Gemara. Even a gadol who's a ben Soromor is not to be judged by Torah's onshim, but rather what? Help me out here. Al Shem Sofo. See, you see then that we're not operating with Torah's onshim. If that be the case, then a katan, even though he's not included in Torah's onshim, might be included in the chal Hashem ben Soromor. Al Shem Sofo Nidon. And the Gemara adds to boot a little bit of icing on the cake that the Torah calls him a ben, which sounds like he's a katan. And the Gemara has to be machadish based on the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Marav that here the word ish doesn't mean what you think it means, and therefore ben doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not a ben hasamach leish, meaning that he's a katan who's almost a gadol. That's not what it means, but rather ish means gvuraso shel ish, and katan who's samach l'kach is a gadol who has shtei sides. Both sides. Just 1 minute. Before I lose I'm going to lose my because I'm running high now. It's just. What's the final conclusion of the Gemara? I understand very well that the Havamina that attacked me, Nolan, thought we're dealing and we're operating with Torah's onshim. I understand very well that the Makshan in the Gemara, justifiably, when he asked the question, Minolan, understood that we're not operating within Torah's onshim. We're operating with a chal Hashem gavra called Ben Soromor al Shem Sof. But now, Rabbi Yehuda Marav quotes a pasuk, and the pasuk excludes katan. So what's the final maskana? Do I have a bottom line in this sugya? Do I know at the end of the day whether Ben Soromor is Torah's onshim, or it's just a chal Hashem Ben Soromor? Do I know it? Do I have it? I don't have it. Why not?
Because the pasuk could be that the entire Havamina is wrong. That means even though the Havamina is right.
Exactly. Beautiful. What is the Torah teaching me with the Ish Ben equation? With that Yalfusa, is the Torah teaching me that a katan is excluded because he doesn't have Torah's onshim, and you were mistaken in your Havamina by thinking that it's a separate chal Hashem Ben Soromor? Or alternatively, is the Gemara saying, you know what? We're not dealing Right, again, so let me go through it again. So one understanding is to say that Lamaskana, Ein Achinami, you're right by asking the question Minolan, and we're dealing with a Chal Hashem ben Soromor, but the Torah says only a gadol. We can't kill a Katan. You want to philosophize about it, you take a course in Jewish philosophy. I don't know what the philosophy is, but the Torah says that we can't kill the Katan, even though he deserves to be included logically in the category of Ben Soromor. Or no, maybe the pasuk is telling me that the underlying premise of the Minalan is incorrect. And we go back to the Makshan who objected to the Minalan, and we assume that we're dealing with Torah's Onshim. I don't know. There's no indication. And here's where I want to pull off a nafkamin. Yeah.
Isn't that showing that it's not Hashem?
That's before the Alfusa of Rabbi Yehuda Marav. So before the Alfusa of Marav, the Gemara was convinced that it's neither an Al Shem Sofa and it's a Chal Hashem ben Soromor. But now we have the pasuk. And you thought that if it's neither an Al Shem Sofa and it's a Chal Hashem, then a Katan should be included. But now the pasuk says a Katan is excluded. So the Torah is coming now, Lafuki, that's Svara. That was the Havamina of Minalan. What was the Havamina in Olan? A Chal Hashem ben Sorah. And now the pasuk is telling you, you know why a Katan is Potter? Because he's a Lav Bar Onshim. Anybody see a little bit of a remez to that in the Mishnah? What does the Mishnah say about a Katan?
That's what it says.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I apologize.
It didn't say lo bar onshim. It said lo ligel
L'chal mitzvahs. He can't be held responsible for any mitzvah, for any avera. So it sounds like the Gemara Lamaskana, and we're now, shall we say, protecting the Mishnah and explaining the Mishnah, is operating within Torah's Onshim. You thought, no, we could jump the gun, we can include Katan, we have a Chal Hashem ben Soromor, and neither an Al Shem Sofo, we're not operating within the framework, blah, blah, blah. That's what you thought. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says that a Katan is excluded. Why? Again, I don't know why. I'll never know why. But what I could derive is the conclusion that the Havamina that brought the question of Minalan is now incorrect. The pasuk is coming lafuke, the premise that you were operating with. And it's coming to teach us that a Katan is excluded because we don't want to punish a Katan. He's a Lav Bar Onshim. And a K'tzas Siyua Lekach, from the language of the Mishnah, She'enu B'chlal, B'chlal mitzvahs. Oh. So the question is, could there possibly be enough nafkamina? Do you have a Rambam? I have a Rambam, but I'm not asking for a Rambam. I'm asking for you to have a Rambam. So what I'd like you to do, if you have a Rambam, you know, the Rambam has 14 books, and we're interested in the last of the 14 books, which is called what? Shoftim. So we're opening up to Hilchos Mamrim, Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph. Are you able to find such a Rambam? Should I wait a minute? So you'll, because I think it's kedai to see it inside if you possibly can. Perek Zayin 7, number 1. Ben Soru Mora, Ha'omer Batorah, Hare Nisparsha Bo Skila. Okay, so far, not sure if I could derive any radical, jump to any radical conclusions here, one way or the other. The Torah says that he's Chayav Skila. I think we could all say amen to that, correct? But then listen to the language of the Rambam. And you'll tell me whether I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. V'lo anash hakosav ela imkain his here. What Rabbosai does that sound like to you?
Like regular onshim.
We're dealing with onshim. And the law, the premise in onshim, and this is a principle that we cannot violate, is that ein onshim elam kain mazhirin. So the Rambam now addresses the following question. Where is the azhara which forms the basis that underlies the onshim? We got to find the azhara. And the Rambam has a complicated limud from a pasuk lo sochlu al adam, Lo sochal achila mevil lidei shvichas dam. This is a fascinating concept unto itself, not for us right this moment, that the achila of a ben sorah moreh makes him addicted, and ultimately it's going to bring him to what? To shvichas dam. So therefore it comes under the lav of lo sochlu al hadam. Achila hamevia lidei shvichas dam. Speak a drop louder, Ari, if you. Now you might say to me, okay, the Rambam finds an Azhara. Not necessarily does this mean that it's onsh, but take a look if you can. Fast forward to Halacha Zayin in the same chapter. So we're in Zayin, Perek Zayin, Halacha Zayin. Ketzad donim ben sorer umoreh. Meviim also aviv ve'imo tchil lebesin shel shlosha v'yomer lahem b'neinu zeh sorer umoreh. Umeviim shnei edim. Again, that sounds typical of what? Of onshim. Like shnei edim, you can't punish a person without two edim. Shegana mishal aviv v'kana basar v'yayin. But Meshaganav, and that's with the money that he stole. This is what he purchased. Now look at the next two words in the Rambam. Achar hasra. Now I'm going to make a big deal. Whether you like it or not, you can beat me up over the Rambam's requirement of hasra. And what I'm going to ask you to do is open up Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph, and tell me if you can find a Rashi. Again, we're looking at Rashi on Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph. Dibra Maskil Masrim Bo. Do you find such a Rashi? Some of the Gemaras have, the Dibra Maskil of Rashi in bold print. Yeah. So towards the end of the Amud, you see it? Oh, that's right. Everybody has the same Gemara. I forgot. So it says Masrimbo, correct? And this, by the way, is the sugya that forms the basis for the Rambam's assumption that a ben sorah umor requires asra. Shekei Masrimbo. Says Rashi. Sorry, you did not understand the Gemara. And the Mishnah. And when the Mishnah says Masrimbo, it doesn't mean what you think it means. You think it means asra, like anyone who's chayav misa requires Eidim Vasra. Nay, it doesn't mean that. This is one of the rare occasions that Rashi is further than Pshuto Shel Dvarim than the Rambam. And the Rashi is going to be forced his back against the wall to reinterpret Masrim. Does Kenet Zayin? It can't be Asra, says Rashi. He doesn't tell you why.
So usually the guy's about to commit a crime. You don't need base still there.
Oh.
You just need to give us raw.
Okay. So you're already proving Rashi's, you're evoking Rashi's proof. But again, just if you focus on two words, Masrimbo, you get the impression, as the Rambam says, they don't shittim ke masirin and Masrimbo. And he needs Hasra, like anyone who's punished in a Bezdin needs Hasra. Says Rashi, Lav mishum Hasra Gemura. Watch this. This is a magical shtick that Rashi pulls over you. It's Asra, but not Asra. Like, give it a break. Either it is or it isn't. I always, whenever I learn in Rishonim, they say, yeah, but it's not Gemura. I always go nuts. I don't know, what is he telling me? Call a spade a spade. He says, La mishum Asra Gemura, which I think he means this is not the classic Hasra that belongs to Kol Torah Kula, to Torah's Onshim, where we require Hasra. Kishar Averos. Shein Lokin Aleim, I added a word here, Ela Basra. And I'll prove it to you. The Hasras Eidim, boy, his first proof is that the Eidim themselves have to give Hasra. In this case, it's not the Eidim who give Hasra. V'yod, and furthermore, Zu Safek Hasra. Hasra has to be Hasra, it's Vadai, meaning it has to come immediately. before the Avera, and the Asra is Vadai that says if you violate this Asra, there's no question. It's absolutely certain that you will be Chai. But here, Im over, Im lav, we don't know. Shalom miyad b'fneim hu over. It's going to take a little bit of a time period until he violates this Hasra. Not only that, where does he violate the Hasra? Does he do it publicly? Ele b'seiser. There are two holes in the bag, in the balloon here. It cannot be Asra Gemura based on Torah's Hasra, Torah's Onshim, for two reasons. First of all, it's Liachar Zman. He violates Asra later on down the line. That makes it into work on Asra Rabosai. If you learn Masechet Makkos, it's Asra something. And secondly, it's the violation of Asra is performed where? In private. The privacy of his father's house. He steals and he drinks and everything else. Ella, so what's this whole business about Hasra? What is the purpose of this Hasra? Rashi says, Mochichen also. We have a responsibility to give him Tochacha. The Torah says in the Parsha Ben Sorah Moreh, V'Yisro also. Shelo Yargil. We have to make sure that he doesn't get into a hergil, into a habit, into an addiction. V'im lo shama, he's not interested in all the admonitions and the warnings. Here we raised the finger. I have a picture of my father with President Carter. Do you remember Jimmy? And he was not, at that particular point, a very good friend of Israel. So it's a beautiful picture. My father's going like this to President Carter, warning him that he better not give us trouble,
You calling Carter a Ben Sorah?
I don't know. I don't want to express my political views here, but because whatever I say will trump me. Anyway, V'im lo shama, ma'otin also b'bezdin. The Alfina lay, Yalif lay, mi v'Yisru also. So Rashi says, is da a bezunder halacha? There's a separate halacha v'Yisru also, and thus that is the asra that we're talking about here, the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Aleph. It is not to be confused with your classic asra. It's a din of tochacha. We're making a last-ditch effort to prevent this youngster from falling into that very deep abyss of a habit. And that's called the Yisro also. The Rambam says that we can only punish him after Hasra. The Rambam doesn't qualify it. The Rambam requires Eidim and Hasra. And as we saw in Halacha Aleph of this parak, the Rambam says, Lo onash hakosav elam kein hizim. So we got three elements. You can check off three boxes before you put the Ben Sorah Moreh to death. Number one, you have an azhara, lo sochlu al adam. Number two, you have two eidim. And number three, you have asra. What is the machlokes here between Rashi and the Rambam? Lefiani is daiti. It depends upon the two definitions of the maskana of the Gemara. When the Gemara quotes the pasuk ish, which means gvuraso shalish, and ben means shtei saros. Lafukia Katan. Why? Why is a Katan being excluded? And if you remember, the one who objected to the Minolan said because a Katan is not included in Torah's Onshim. So the Maskana, the Sugya, excluding Katan, is telling you don't hack a chinik with a Shem Ben Sorah Moreh and a Nidon al Shem. So leave that out. We're operating with Torah's Onshim. And a Katan is not included in Torah's Onshim. Rashi had a different understanding. Rashi understood that the logic of the Gemara in asking the question, the underlying premise is absolutely convincing. It's compelling. And what is Torah Ben Sorah Moreh? It's a Chal Shem Ben Sorah Moreh. It's not Torah's Onshim. Rashi, therefore, would drop the requirement of Asra. The Gemara, the Mishnah says Masrin, so that's a different halacha. Bezdin is obligated in the mitzvah of Yisro, so to try to prevent this almost inevitable catastrophe in which we're going to have to put this boy to death. So we give him tochacha, and that's called Asra. It's a mistake of the word. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes a word can mean two things. The source of all mistakes is in semantics. When you have a word that could be interpreted in two ways, the word asra could mean one of two things. It's a technical legal condition, or it's a matter of, we got to warn this guy so that he straightens himself out.
What are we warning him? Didn't we say Soromar is neighbor and eating the wall?
No, but you remember we said it's two rounds. Do you remember that?
What do you warn him about? Each of them gets warrants.
No. First, the father and mother bring him to Beis Din, and there's testimony to the fact that he did X, Y, and Z. Then we warn him, we send him back, and we bring him back the second time around. If he gets back the second time around, you don't want to be there. You know what I mean? So if, Ari, you have little doubts about what I just told you, then you want to open up, now that we all have the Masifta, to the beginning of the Otzer Hayunim that we're studying, right? Let's put the Rambam on the side for a minute, just to review what we did already, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it's always Kedai to do Chazorah. And this is on page Aleph in the Otzer Iyunim. Before the Otzer Iyunim, there is a Tochen, there's a table of contents. So it's good that we take a minute of time to get familiar with the book that you all have, thanks to Ari and Ellie. Do you see? It's almost the last section. The Masifta is an unbelievable storehouse, a treasury of knowledge. There's also something called Kamtzis Hadaf for those who are learning Daf Yomi, and there's something called Kafta V'Fera. But see if you can find something called Otzer Hayunim. Truth is, if I want to be honest with you, Rabbosai, if the Masifta would make a decision that we are going to take the Otzer Hayunim from each Masechta, maybe compile a Shas called Otzer Hayunim al Shas, I wouldn't have told you to buy this. I would just tell you to buy the Otzer Hayunim. Because honestly, that's for me why we need this Masifta. But you'll see that the Otzer Hayunim is quite extensive. How many pages is it? It's like 100 pages. Yeah, so I wouldn't want to photocopy. Besides copyright laws, you know what I'm saying? Oh, there's a lot of good things here. It's mamish a great shalom of different things. So if you take a look at the second paragraph, you see where it says, Ari, say there hadvarim. So that's just a summary, like he gives you a quick tamtzit of Ben Soru Moreh. I say there hadvarim, and he says the following. He says, Yignov Mishal Aviv v'yochal tartimar basar v'yishteh chatzi lugsh yayin italki. First page, Aleph. Page Aleph, the second paragraph. In the Otzer Hayunim. V'oz malkino so b'fnei bezdin shel shlosha. So that's round number 1. And that's when his parents brought him to bezdin for the first. And liachar mikan, he was omeid b'merit, meaning he went back and continued his rebellion. V'chazar v'kilkel, again a second time. B'gneva v'achila. And now, how much of a bezdin do we need? Now we need a bezdin of what? Of Chaf Gimel. Because now he's going to be put to death. So Rabbosai, I see it's getting late. Thank God we davened already, so I don't have to feel that pressure. But I think that since we started at 7:45, and don't kill me for saying this, we could end at 8:45. Is that okay? Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I was worried that 8:30 we all turned into a pumpkin like Cinderella. You know what I'm saying? Great. So if we have another 12, 13 minutes, whatever you have on the clock, let's take 2 or 3 minutes just to summarize what we said, and then we go weiter, we go on. We had a premise of the Makshan who attacked Minolan. We had the premise of the Minolan against the Makshan, and we interpreted the Shakla V'Tarya of the objector to Minolan and the progenitor of Minolan in the following way. What is Ben Sorah Morah? Is Ben Sorah Morah Torah's Onshim, or is it a Chalul Shem Ben Sorah Morah? The nafkamina in the Gemara, which is not Lamaisa, it's only a theoretical nafkamina, is Katan. If you're operating with Torah's Onshim, obviously Katan is excluded. He's not included in Onshim, never. If on the other hand, you're operating with this new concept of Ben Sora Mora because Nidon Hashem Sofa, then a Katan could be included. Then we ask the following question, Lamaskana, that we have a pasuk. What is the Alfusa telling? Is the Alfusa accepting the Havamina of Minolan? Namely, we're dealing with Ben Sora Mora as a separate entity, and we're out of the parsha of Torah's Onshim, but the Torah will never know why excluded a Katan. Or alternatively, is the pasuk coming to exclude the Havamina and the premise that underlies the Minolan to go back to our original understanding, namely that Ben Sora Mora is Torah's Onshim. And then we said perhaps an Afkamina would be Hasra. The Rama requires Hasra like any Onshim. Not only that, the Rama requires Ashara. And he looks at a pasuk, Lo Sochel Adam. Rashi, on the other hand, says, you're making a big mistake. I could just imagine a debate between Rashi and the Rambam in front of our eyes. Rashi would say to the Rambam, you made a big mistake, Rabbeinu Moshe, because the word Asra doesn't mean what you think it means. It has a very unique and specific meaning in this context, and I'll prove it to you, says Rashi, with two proofs. Number one, it's Asra Safek, because we don't know exactly when he's going to do it. Number two, he never violates the Asra publicly, he does it in private. And therefore Rashi comes up with a whole new interpretation of Asra. But the Rambam clearly is operating within the framework of Torah's. Okay, Rabbi, so we have 9 minutes left. Let's go on in the sugya. Now, the next part of the sugya, is anybody here? No, this is a ridiculous question. We don't have a urologist here in the in attendance, do we? Do we have any doctors? No. Yeah, one physician. All right, so maybe I don't think you're a urologist necessarily, but maybe you know more about, like my son is a doctor. He took anatomy in med school. I shouldn't say this publicly, but he told me the day after the exam, he forgot everything. Anatomy is, it's all memorization. So maybe you'll help us here in the anatomy, the biology of it. If not, we'll have to use Google. The Gemara says the following. First of all, I want to make sure everybody has the place. We're in the middle of Masechet Sanhedrin, and you'll see that the text of our Gemara quotes the text of the Mishnah, V'ad sheyakiv zakan atachton. The first word in the line is zakan. You have it? It's mamish midway, almost, maybe it's a little bit more than midway down the page. Tani Rabbi Chia. The Gemara quotes a brayso. Ad sheyakiv, what does that mean, ad sheyakiv? Ha'atara. Atara here means gid. Gid means the organ itself, the male organ. So it seems that pubic hairs somehow surround that organ. Probably it means at the base of the organ. Are you with me? There's like a ring around the organ, which is called the atara. However, the Gemara tells us about Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, where Rav Chia was the Gadol Adar there, and he said the following. We misunderstood Rabbi Chia in one sense, and that is, Asa Rav Dimi, the Omar, hakofas gid, v'lo hakofas beitzin. There's a very important kind of secret here that is hidden between the, between the lines, so to speak, of Rabbi Chia's brayso. When you see the word atara, you're not exactly sure what it means. But I'm going to tell you what it means, says Rav Dimi, because I was there in Eretz Yisrael when we researched this whole sugya and Rabbi Chia's brayso, and it means hakofas gid v'lo hakofas beitzin. So that means, again, I'm not a urologist, that at some point the pubic hair, the pubic hairs will surround the testicles themselves. But that's down the line. That's going to take a while. So there's a two-stage process, and again, we have to check this out on Google or with the urologist, in the growth of the pubic hairs. Stage number one is there's sort of like a ring around the organ, at the base of the organ, and then later on, maybe 3 months, maybe a half a year, I don't know how long later. Okay, that's, I guess, a sign that we have to end the shir. But if you could listen Baal Peh, so just like I finish this introduction, and we'll pick it up in Masechet next week. There's another stage in which the pubic hairs grow around the base and around the testicles. So that what Reb Chia is trying to tell us in light of the interpretation of Rav Dimi is, don't think for a moment that the ceiling, which is called Gvuras Ish, is when the hairs surround the beitzim. No. It's a much earlier stage. It's when the hairs are surrounding the gid, which might be months and months earlier. Already at that point, we've reached the stage of what? Yaakov Hazakan Atachton. By the way, is that a kula or a chumrah? It's a kula, because that tells you that already at stage 1, we've already reached Gvuras Ish. In other words, that stage, which we said is parallel to Nara in Zachar, which again I want to develop a little bit further next week, is a very limited stage. It's from Shtei Saros until Yaakov es Hagid, which is called Yaakov es Hazakan Atachton. And Yaakov es Hagid is much earlier. Already at that stage in the child's development, finito. He's out of the parsha of Ben Sorum. So, B'li Neder, next week, I'd like to really analyze this sugya. You know, on the face of it, it sounds like a very kind of a gory kind of sugya. You know what I mean? It's not lo na'im, but as you and I know, Torah is not embarrassed, and it addresses the entire universe. It's takal baraisa bara alma. So B'li Neder. So we'll end the shir with a thank you to all our sponsors, and, especially the sponsors for the Masifta. And it takes a tremendous headache off my head that now we all have the Masifta. Okay, then? That's good. So I think we'll have to maybe turn on.
Let's carry the